in our ways and just are locked in. And we've done it this way for 30 years. The Republican Party was established by certain individuals 20, 30, or 40 years ago. We never change our way, and we just drift and act more like Democrats. Nothing will happen. That is why we have to be willing to look at this ideologically and change people's minds, and then we can change our country. But you know, we're in a pretty big mess. There's no doubt about it. I actually got involved in politics in the early 70s when Nixon made this announcement about getting off the gold standard. He put on a huge import tariff. He put in wage and price controls. And then he announced to the world, we're all Keynesians now, which meant that we all believed in this liberal Keynesian economic policy. And boy, I thought, this is horrible. This is going to lead to, you know, a lot of trouble. But the point of his statement was that Democrats generally are accused of being liberal on economic policy, and they're Keynesians, not free market people. And he said, we're all Keynesians now, which meant the country had changed. Not the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, but the whole country. And this came about because it was taught in our schools. We were taught, I was taught, many of us in this room were taught, only interventionist economics. You know, there you have to have a Federal Reserve. I happen to have come to the conclusion, I don't even think we need a Federal Reserve at all.
Yeah! In the Fed! In the Fed! Fed! In the Fed! In the Fed! In the Fed!
There's a few people who understand that now. But 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. But you didn't learn about the Federal Reserve in our average colleges and our schools, because we've always been taught. I was taught that the Federal Reserve was a good organization. If you have good times, the Fed did it because they printed a lot of money. And then if you came to that inevitable correction and there had to be a downturn and recession or depression, then the Federal Reserve would get us out of that trouble. And that's the way it's happened, you know, for years and years, except since 2008. Now people are starting to realize that you just can't forever spend money, run up debt, borrow money, and then print the money you have left over, and you think you're going to have prosperity. So people are being much more analytical now about it. Just since 2008, they have quadrupled the money supply if you measure your Federal Reserve credit. It went from $800 billion to over $3.2 trillion. Now, I don't think it takes a PhD. Matter of fact, sometimes the PhD gets people confused. But it doesn't take a genius to figure out that if you can create trillions and trillions of dollars, it's going to solve the problem. That doesn't create wealth. What creates wealth is hard work, savings, investment.
Yeah.
But, you know, in true free markets, you have to work hard, and what you don't consume, you save, and that becomes capital. But for many decades now, we weren't, and we still aren't very good savers in this country. It turns out that the Chinese are savers right now, and they have capital. But we don't save. So where does the money come from if people don't save? Well, they've resorted to going to the Federal Reserve, and they call it capital. Where does the bank get capital? Well, they go to the Federal Reserve. That's a total fallacy. And the most amazing thing about it is that it's still lasting a while. You know, it's still going on. But when you think about the problems around the world, whether it's Greece or Spain or Italy or Cyprus, things are worse over there. So they're willing to still take our dollars. So this is all temporary, and I think we're going to face a major crisis. But for me, the solution is not going to come by electing 2 or 5 or 10 more members of Congress. Of course, that's always very important, because the louder our voice is in Congress, the better off we will be. But it won't change until the people decide what kind of government they want, what the role of government ought to be. And that's what the founders talked about. What should the role of government be? And they decided that the government shouldn't have the power of the king to do the things that he was doing, and the taxation and fighting the wars and invading our houses and all these things. But they decided that the purpose of the government was to protect freedom, not undermine freedom. And we did pretty well. until in this last century, last 100 years, it's been pretty much downhill. Civil liberties have been undermined, the economic system has been eroded, and unfortunately, we have gone astray on foreign policy. We have spent so much money on foreign policy and welfareism at home that we are technically very bankrupt. So if we're ever to turn this around, the people have to decide what kind of government they want. Because the government that people want, they usually end up getting it. And that would mean we would have to change our economic policy, change our attitude about the Federal Reserve. Not only should we get rid of the Federal Reserve, I think in a truly free society like the founders believe, I don't even think we should have an income tax if we had a problem. Supposed to do this, they have to spend the money, but if we're not producing, they can't pay for it. So it's spending, borrowing, printing until it finally ends, and history shows it always ends badly. But not only would we have to think seriously about changing our attitude about welfare, we would have to think about what kind of a foreign policy we have. The foreign policy that both parties have followed now for many, many decades has been that we have this role to play, that we have to spread our goodness, that we have to force other people what to do. But it's boiled down to the